Hello and welcome to another day on Cornwall Pocket Farm, where I try and figure out how to live more sustainably on 300 square metres in the city. Today is another one of my tips and tricks videos. It's sort of tips and tricks about your wardrobe, the things you might wear, your clothes essentially. And these are things that I have just sort of discovered over, I think about the last 8 years. Yeah, it was about 8 or 10 years ago I decided rather than just sort of randomly flailing about in the sort of the dress and fashion department, I would sort of consciously try and make my wardrobe work better. I talked a little bit about that in a previous video, which I will link here. And really that sort of moment where I thought, this really isn't working and I really need to put some conscious effort into trying to make it work. And it was effort well spent. And what I wanted to do in this series was really just share a few things that I have done that I found really helpful, in the hope that they might be of assistance to you if you're currently trying to figure out your style or trying to figure out how to make your wardrobe work a bit better. Last video in this series I talked about figuring out my proportions and how I worked out what shapes worked best on me, what lines and what proportions really worked for my body. I'll link to that video here if you haven't seen it. And the whole process really is about just creating a little sort of fashion drawing that is your proportions and, you know, looks exactly like you. Well, obviously my drawing is pretty poor, so it doesn't look exactly like me, but do you know what I mean? The proportions and your shapes and sizes and how everything works together. It is your body, and you can try things out on a piece of paper before you commit to buying something or thrifting something or making something. So anyway, that video, and do go and have a look at that video if you haven't already, because I think it is an important part of the puzzle. The next piece, of course, is colour. The first thing, I think, which is a pretty quick win, I think. I found this bit quite easy, and this is, do you suit white or do you suit, but that is really hard to say. Do you suit white or do you suit cream better? For me, I thought about all the clothes that I had worn over my life and sort of what I'd found had worked really well, what I didn't like. I looked in my current wardrobe and I thought, well, what things do I wear a lot? What things don't I wear? And why don't I wear them? And what became quite clear to me was that when something was cream, I didn't wear it. Even if, for instance, it was like a cream base and then all the colours on top were colours that I really liked and like the pattern was amazing. If it was cream on the base, say, it didn't really work for me. It just sort of went in there. It's just sort of dull. It's just flat. I can't really explain any more than that. But whenever I had something that was cream, it stayed in my wardrobe. Even if I sort of popped it on and tried it every now and again, I'd invariably end up taking it off because it was like, yeah, no, it doesn't feel right. The opposite was true of white. So when I put white things on, I felt crisp and smart and alive and bright, and yeah, white really worked for me. And it was sort of weird because I hadn't actually thought about that before. Seems mad now, doesn't it? But I hadn't actually thought about it. So of course, once you realise that white suits you and cream doesn't suit you, what's happened now is I just don't ever look at anything when it's cream. It's not always as clear cut as that, as you can imagine, because of course there is off-white. Now off-white is sort of mostly white, but it's a little bit cream, but it's not quite cream. Now, where does that line get drawn? I mean, I don't know. It just isn't a black and white sort of. Oh, well, I suppose that's appropriate. It's not black or white. It's not white and it's not black. It's not a black or white issue really. It's a white and cream issue, obviously. But white can be off-white, but there's a point at which off-white to me becomes cream. Anyway, I have some fabric up in my stash up there that is off-white. And I thought, when I bought it, it was a number of years ago now, and I bought it, and I thought, oh, off-white, that's okay. When I got back and put it up to my face in a mirror, and I was intending to make a shirt, a sort of blouse with this silk, I realised that it was a bit too cream and not quite white enough to make a blouse. So it sat up there and sat up there, and I've been feeling a bit guilty about it. But then I had a brilliant idea, if I do say so myself. I'm going to make underwear with it because it's silk. And it's beautiful silk, and I thought, well, I could make some underwear. Now that's obviously a project that's coming to this channel in I don't know when, but I decided that cream silk would be perfect for underwear because, of course, if you wear bright white underwear, even under a white shirt, a bright white bra under a white shirt will show through the shirt because, of course, it's quite a contrasting colour. I suppose it contrasts to your skin, doesn't it? Not that I'm particularly tanned, shall we say, but anyway, white, it isn't very good under your clothes. So that if you have something that's off-white or sort of a little bit more, a softer colour than white, which is obviously quite a bright colour, then it works better under clothes. So I think this silk is going to be perfect for underwear. Now I understand from YouTube that there are people that have neutral colouring where they cream suits them and white suits them. There's lots of videos on that if you want to go and do some research and find out yourself. But for me, almost luckily, I found that white really works and cream doesn't. So that's easy, quick win. So the next thing I needed to do was to work out what colours do suit me, which colours I like. And of course, I mean, I looked in the wardrobe that I had at the time, but of course, if you remember from the previous video, the problem with the colours that I had in my wardrobe was that I had bought them from high street shops, and that issue of, oh, this is the colour of the season, and now everybody's forced into wearing lime green or peach because that's the colour of the season. Certainly that's how it works in New Zealand. I have heard in the comments that that's not the case everywhere. I would imagine that to be so. We have a very small population, and other places like America and the UK, I mean, obviously their population is much larger, so I'm sure there's much more choice. But over in New Zealand, there isn't a lot of choice. You get the colour of the season and black. So I had some random colours in my wardrobe which weren't really the colours that I particularly liked. So what I did was I thought back over all the clothes that I'd worn in my past, and I thought about all of the outfits that really stood out, the pieces of clothing that I wore and wore and wore till literally they fell apart in my hands and I almost mourned their passing. I'm sure we have all had clothes like that, haven't we? You know, where you think, oh, I love that, and like it is gone, you can't replace it. You know, it's been, you've had it so long that of course it's not in the shops anymore. So I thought back over those pieces, and what I've actually done is I've put together a bit of a mood board, if you like, of those pieces. I've looked on the internet to try and find pieces of clothing that are very similar, if you like, to the piece of clothing that I can remember in my head. Of course, I couldn't find the exact ones, obviously, because it's millions of years ago, but these are sort of representations of the clothing that I really loved. I did this originally for two different reasons. One of them was for colour, and the other reason, of course, was proportion and shape, because the other thing is like what shapes fit my body and make me feel good, and which shapes and proportions have I loved a lot in the past. But for this exercise, it was about colour. And when I went through that and looked at the colours, it was quite clear that the colours that I liked were red and green and blue and navy and sort of teal and pink and white, and you know, there were some clear colours that I liked. Grey, I like grey, and I liked a forest green, that really deep forest green. So those were my colours, clearly, and now I know exactly. I mean, it sounds obvious because there aren't that many colours in the world, but red, green and blue are the colours that I like, and those are my neutrals. If you like, you know, I don't have a neutral of black. I mean, my neutral, I suppose, would be navy, because I like navy and I use that as a neutral. I use navy as a neutral, white as a neutral, but I have been known to use red as a neutral, you know. So what I did was I looked at all the colours from my memory on these pieces of clothing that I'd remember that I'd love to death. I looked in my current wardrobe and I looked at the clothes that I wore all of the time, the ones that I reached for and wore all the time, and I felt great in, and I felt really good walking out of the house in these particular colours. I also did a bit of Pinterest searching, although I found that is a bit difficult because often you see somebody else, and this happens to me all the time. I see somebody else and I think, oh wow, you look amazing in that. And they look amazing in that. But that doesn't mean I'll look amazing in that. So what I decided to do was take the colours, red, green, blue, yellow, left out orange. I don't like orange. So I could leave out some of these colours. Yellow I quite like, but it's a very specific yellow that I like. I don't like an acid yellow. I don't like a bright yellow. It has to be almost going to the beige side of things. It's got to be sort of from banana yellow down. It's difficult to talk about colour, isn't it? Because what I have in my head and the words I'm using, it's going to be different for you. So anyway, this is why you need to do it yourself, essentially. I found that the best way to do it was to do it on the computer. I got a PowerPoint, Keynote, whatever you've got where you can make coloured boxes, essentially. And I did a little bit of a sort of experiment. Would that be the word? I don't know. I explored the colours. What I've discovered is really useful in these pieces of software is that you can change the opacity on a particular colour fill box so that essentially you can see through it. And you change the opacity of that sort of down to maybe 20 or 30%. Then take this black semi-opaque box and put it over the top. You'll now have changed the colour underneath into a slightly darker shade, because of course a shade of a colour is just the colour with black in it. You can do the same thing with white. If you get a box and you fill it with white and change the opacity of the white down to say 20 or 30% and put that over the top of a colour, you will change the tint. They call it the tint of a colour, where it will get lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. In my head, I was thinking, okay, forest green is a colour. And then this green is a different colour. It isn't. This green is forest green with less black in it. So if you take this green and you make a box out of this green and then you overlay a tint box, you can make this turn into a forest green, a dark green. So you can change the different ways you see the colours. And what I realised was that all of these colours that in my head I had, I like forest green and I like pale pink and I like red and I like maroon and I like, navy and I like all these different colours. You actually realise in the end, I realised in the end that what I liked was red, green and blue. And when I put over these shades and these tints, I make it into light colours and dark colours, and that pretty much covered all of the colours that I liked. So in the end, I've sort of pretty much discovered that I like 4 colours. I like green, blue, red, and a sort of a turquoisey teal colour. And so that turquoisey teal colour in the summer becomes a really sort of pale turquoise colour, and in the winter it becomes a really deep, rich sort of bluey green colour. And that's another thing that I found, that actually I like pale colours in the summer, and in the winter I like richer, deeper colours. So I went through the process that I've described, where I was getting these boxes and covering them with tints and shades and making them lighter and darker. And I essentially put together in the end a palette which are my colours. And I did that by putting in the 4 colours that I like, red, green, blue, and then this sort of turquoisey teal colour. And then, of course, I put in my neutrals. So I like navy and grey. But, of course, greys, of course, are just a tint of black. I have a little bit of brown in my wardrobe, which sort of is like yellow as well, So that's in there as well. But I'll put up my colour palette that I created for myself. And hopefully you can see on this color palette how it's working. So in the summer, I like the, you know, the pinks and the pale blues and the really sort of pale turquoise colors. And then in the winter, I'm much more drawn to sort of maroon and the sort of the forest green and the deep, rich teal. Of course, there is some crossover. In summer, I wear navy and all sorts of things, but I have found that generally that is the case. The other thing I found with doing the color palette, and as you saw in my video, I was sort of playing with that color wheel to try and get the color exactly right. For me, I found that if I moved over to a really bright color, so a really clean, bright color, like a bright green, like a lime green, I don't like that sort of color. It's too bright and it's too simple, I think is the word. I like a more complex color, a color that's sort of like, it's like red, but it's a bit bluey red. Red, I like a sort of a blood red or a maroony red. I'm not that fond on like an absolute bang slap red, you know, like a really clear red. I like red that's a little bit more complicated. So, and blue again, and all of those things. So find out what you like. Do you like something that's really clear, a really clear, simple color? Do you like a sort of a more muted color? What's that called? A tone. So the other thing with colors is that if you overlay not a tint of black, but if you overlay grey, that'll sort of dull the colors down a bit. Now that doesn't work for me. I find that I like my colors to be strong and full. I don't like them to be dulled. But if you're somebody who likes more of a muted colours, then you want to overlay with grey. Or if you're going around the colour wheel, just go for the more muted part of the colour wheel. For me, I like those sort of stronger, clearer colours, but I don't like them to be that sort of really simple, clean colour. Does that make sense? It's really difficult to talk about colour. Very, very hard. And also I'm very aware, getting very philosophical here, that what I have in my head and what I see through my eyes is not the same as what other people have in their head or see through their eyes. So yeah, it is a very personal thing. But I believe that really you need to have colours that make you feel happy, because I think it is one of the great joys in life is colour. I just think it's so fabulous. I mean, honestly, when I see some colours, my mouth waters. I mean, I just love colour. So I just find it so exciting. And I spent many a fun evening playing with those colour boxes in my on my computer, working out the exact colours and how they all go together and how they overlay and all those sorts of things. So give that a go and see if that helps at all. But I found that the key thing to do is actually just to put some intention into it. Because I think we all just wander around buying things that are in the shops. Oh yeah, that's okay. Oh, well, I like that one better than that one. Yeah, that'll do. And you tend to just sort of randomly collect colours. Sometimes random colour collection works, but sometimes it doesn't. The other important thing is what goes with all the other things in your wardrobe. This is where I'm going to show you something that I have created. Years ago, we used to have these and we used to use them, and we had business cards in them. In fact, actually, it was only probably one of my last jobs, I think. We were given business cards. I was working for a bank. We were given business cards and they went in a business card holder. It's quite a fat one. As you can see, there's plenty of room in here. But of course, I don't have business cards anymore. And so this is now something else. So if I open this, hopefully you can see. This is now full of fabric scraps. So whenever hopefully you can recognize this. Remember my capsule wardrobe? That is the Carmen. This is the Audrey. Here is the Joan. So what I do with this is I keep all my fabric pieces together. It's really lovely actually, because I'm looking through this now. And in here is sort of like a little history of everything that I've made. I started out doing this very carefully, and so these things, these early ones, are all actually on cards. I think, yeah, they're all on cards, just stapled on cards. And so it was all very well organized when I started it. I've even got one here. Look, this is Look at this one. You see, this is beautifully organized, this one. So here, these are sort of, wool. Oh, look at that. Can you guess what wool that is? You see that green? That's this cardigan here. And as you can see, by the time I got to the end, I'm literally just shoving in the little pieces of fabric. But it works brilliantly. What happens is whenever this stays in my handbag, and when I'm in a shop and I think, oh, I wonder if that will go with this shirt or this, whatever it happens to be, I can pull out my little business card case, pull out that fabric and go, oh, look, that looks really nice, doesn't it? And that works perfectly together. If I'm in a charity shop and I think, oh, that's nice, I wonder if it would go with my whatever trousers, I can just look in the business card case and find that fabric. So here is the corduroy. This corduroy here is the trousers that I am wearing. And this is the cardigan that I'm wearing. So I bought the fabric to make these trousers much later than I bought the wool to make this cardigan. This cardigan is, golly, 10 years old? Must be. But I could tell in the shop when I bought this fabric that it was going to go with that cardigan and that it would go with this shirt and that shirt and what have you. So these are not all fabrics that I have in my stash ready to go. Some of them are things that I have made, worn to death and have dyed, but I love them. Some of them are bits of fabric that I have in my stash that I'm going to make something with in the future. And some of them are fabric swatches of things that I have in my wardrobe now, things that are actually on my body and I'm wearing. But if you're somebody like me that likes all that colour, the key thing is to get colours that will go with other colours and get them to all match and all work together. And this little business card holder full of fabric scraps is the key. Because when I go out to buy something, sometimes I'll be thinking, oh, that looks nice. I bet you that would go in my wardrobe. And I get out my fabric swatches and I go, oh, actually, no, it's not. It's a bit off. It's not quite right. And then I don't get it, or I don't buy that fabric, or whatever it happens to be, the wool's not right. Whenever I go wool shopping, exactly the same. I'll hold the wool to my fabric swatches to make sure it'll go with the majority of my wardrobe and that it will fit into the family of colours that I like and that I have in my wardrobe. So that is just a little tip that I have found very useful. I do hope that you try doing your own sort of colour, what is it, colour chart? Would it be a colour chart? Palette. Let's call it a palette. That sounds very fancy, doesn't it? So I do hope you have a go at creating your own colour palette and really exploring the colours that you like and the colours that you want to wear, the colours that are going to make you happy. And then once you've found the colours that you really like and that you feel happy in and that you want your wardrobe to be comprised of, having some sort of container then to put a bunch of scraps in is really useful to keep those colours cohesive and working together. Now, obviously this works really easily if you're somebody like me who makes a lot of your own clothes and, knits and those types of things. But if you're somebody who doesn't do that, I think you could possibly do a similar thing. Maybe using paint charts. You know, when you go to, those sort of like, DIY shops and then they have all those paint swatches that you can just pick up and take away. You could possibly do the same there. You could probably just cut out those little paint chips and put those in a container so that when you go around to buy things to join into your wardrobe, you're keeping within that same sort of colour family, if you like, or the family that you have decided can live in your wardrobe. Anyway, I hope that's of help. I thought I'd just share that with you. As always, if you have enjoyed my video, please give it a thumbs up and comment below if you've got any ideas. I love to learn these things. So if you've got any ideas at all, put it down below because then everybody else can learn from your experience and your knowledge. And I'd love to know. So please put it in the comments below. Subscribe, all of that sort of stuff would be great. Anyway. I'm not sure what the next one will be. I really need to get cracking on my winter capsule wardrobe. And I think what I'm going to start doing is, I have been busy doing a bunch of other stuff with curtains, but I think what I'm going to do is just start making some stuff because the weather's still a bit iffy. It's windy and wet today. And while the weather is not great, I tend to sort of be indoors and sew more. So yeah, I think I might crack on with the first piece in my winter capsule wardrobe because I know exactly what it's going to be. Anyway, I have this, I'm sure this video is way too long as it is, and I'm going to have a terrible job editing it to get down small enough to go onto YouTube. So I'm not going to waffle on anymore. I should actually have put a disclaimer at the beginning, shouldn't I? Like they do. Go and get a cup of tea, make yourself comfortable, and sit there and listen to me waffle on about this, that, and the other. Anyway, it's been lovely chatting, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.